Good afternoon, everyone. So you're in the right place. We are here today to talk about winning the talent war and using the moments that matter across the employee life cycle to attract and retain staff. It's a conversation that we've been having with lots of organisations over the last few months, and we thought it would be the right time to put this webinar on. And I'm really excited to be joined by Neil Hayward today, who is a longtime friend of WorkBuzz. And Neil's going to be here sharing his experiences working with HS2 and how they use the moments that matter across the employee life cycle to impact on some hefty business outcomes such as retention. So hopefully some great learnings that you can take from today. But some housekeeping first. We are recording this, so a copy will be emailed to you after the event along with the slides. And please feel free to use the Q&A feature. I know that I've spoken to some of you who are on the call today who are particularly interested in kind of learning from others around what they're doing at the moment to solve for retention. So on top of what Neil shares, then feel free to share your experiences too. Your host today is me. So I'm Dawn, I'm Enterprise Client Lead at WorkBuzz, if you haven't spoken to me already, but I wear two hats. I also am responsible for our culture here at WorkBuzz, and there's nothing more important than that. So I have two equal passions. One is helping our clients improve the employee experience, but also kind of looking at that through our own lens at WorkBuzz. So who are WorkBuzz? For those that don't know, we talk about being HR's secret weapon. We give you the ability to gather real-time feedback through more regular listening and improve the employee experience. We're really passionate about helping you build inclusive cultures and making smarter people decisions. So if you want to find out more about WorkBuzz, if you don't know about us already, then you can click on our website and kind of see some of the great work that we're doing with other organisations. And I just wanted to highlight that on the 5th of October in London, we're very excited to be bringing WorkBuzz Live back in 2022, where we're going to be focusing on this very subject of moments that matter. And it's at the Plasterers or the Plaisterers Hall in central London. There was a big debate going on in the WorkBuzz office around the pronunciation of that today. Neil, do you know?
Plaisterers.
Plaisterers Hall. There you go. Central London. We'd love you to join us. We've got some amazing speakers. So if you want to attend, then just head to the website. There's a link on there where you can register. I think some of you already have, which is very exciting. You can join our Employee Experience Hub by scanning on the QR link that you can see on the screen. That's a community that we have in place to help share lots of content really around culture. There's e-learning in there. There's the opportunity to connect and learn from other people that work in HR and internal comms. And it's a growing community. So come and join us. It's all free. And there's lots of ebooks on our website where we're always sharing the latest and greatest research that we're doing on this end. So that's just a little bit of setting the scene, a little bit about WorkBuzz, invitations to events and all those joyous things. But without further ado, we're going to go into the content and why we're really here today. So I just wanted to set the scene a little bit. And lots of the conversations that I've been having recently are people asking kind of what is engagement, what is employee experience, almost what is the difference. So I thought we could almost just set the scene a little bit today and talk about how we view engagement. And I think it's fair to say that all organizations want their people to be engaged. We all do, but we can't drive it. No one wants to be driven. What it comes down to really is a choice that we make every day. So we choose to engage with the vision, missions and value of the organizations that we work with. So if it's a choice, then all we can do is create a culture and an environment that people choose to engage with. So I think we try and really simplify what engagement is by looking at it through this lens. And when we think of it as a choice, then what we get to is the employee experience. And there's a lot of talk about the employee experience today as well. And I think we're trying to debunk the myth a little bit. And every employee experience is made up of a series of moments. I think we'd probably all agree on that. Each moment shapes how you feel about the overall experience. So what we have within our circle of control, working in HR, working in these really influential roles, is the ability to shape what these experiences look like. And these can be shaped by the organisation in terms of the initiatives, the strategies that we put in place, but also through the leaders that we have to really understand what the moments that matter most to our people are. And so today, when we're talking about moments that matter, we're talking about those moments that have the biggest impact and that can really turn that employee experience into something positive. And in the world we live in, where we're all battling with retention, where we're all thinking of ways to keep our people engaged, to make them want to stay with us, then these things really matter. So I just thought we'd stop for a second, and if you can, just think in the last month, what's been a moment that matters to you at work? And just pop it in the chat, if you will. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to do it. And then we'll maybe read some of them out. Ross. So Sarah, thanks Sarah, recognition from the business that there is a need to listen to our employees. Yay! Love that. Being recognised for setting up a new channel of communication. Being told I was doing a good job by Dawn. Thank you, Neil. Isn't it funny that recognition and appreciation is coming through in all of those things, even though some of them are a bit tongue-in-cheek? It's all about kind of feeling valued and appreciated. Kylie, one of my team has kept the normal BAU going as I was working on a big project. Amazing. I think what's special about this is that they're all different, and all of us have different experiences at work every day. Rachel's just put, finally recruiting the talent support I've been asking for, and the business seeing the need and value in this. Love it. So if we all have different moments that matter to us, then doesn't that mean that everyone has different moments that matter to them across the organization? So what it really comes down to is us knowing what they are. And I think what we're here today to talk about is how, through more regular employee listening, that gives you the ability to capture those. I've said so much over the last few months, what you don't know, you don't know. So what we're trying to do here is open up those channels and ask the right questions to get a better feel for what they are as well. And Neil, is going to share his experiences. But Neil, why is this so important?
I think my learned experience was that as an HR professional, I tended to start off by looking at this as being, oh, I've got a responsibility for shaping the employee experience in an organization. If I can make the right interventions across the employee life cycle, that'll help us win in getting people in and keeping them, and that should feed through to sort of engage people, productivity, etc. In other words, a very head argument around why this was a good thing to do. I think actually from working with WorkBuzz over a number of years, I gradually became aware that actually HR can't own all of this, and that you have to concentrate on some other things. So, beneath the surface of the obvious things that you get feedback on, there are more opaque moments which are less obvious, and you get a hint of them, but you can't always see them. So let me give you a real illustration. You join a new organization. It doesn't matter how good your line manager is on that induction process. If you wait 4 weeks to get your laptop set up, your immediate first impression in that organization is not a good one. It feels like somehow the brand recruitment promise has been let down. So that might not show up in terms of something that HR can do. In other words, but it might show up in terms of feedback around other functions needing to work together to get something done for the people in the business. So HR doesn't own all the policy and all the answers. And then there's the more important point, which is, and it goes back to this feedback stuff you've just given us, Dawn, in our little conversation there. There are invisible moments that matter to individuals, and it's what's going on in their lives. It's the anniversaries, it's births, marriages, deaths. It's the moment where you recognize somebody needs an individual personal moment and a solution that's only theirs and has got nothing to do with the formal procedures and policy and contents of organizational life. So, in effect, you have to get into a culture, this conversation, where you're training and enabling line managers to be personal and personable with the people who work for them, as they would be at home when they're with their families, because those invisible moments have as much, if not more, impact than any of the things you do to put the kind of harder, more processy, edgy stuff right. So I think the insights that we've worked on at HS2 that came from the survey tools that we use from WorkBuzz kind of gave us insight, not just to the employee experience moments, but also those more opaque things, and sometimes even the invisible things.
Yeah, and it's about enabling people to have meaningful conversations, isn't it? And what, you know, it goes back to what you don't know, you don't know. So let's ask the right questions to try and unpick that. But if we look at the bigger picture of the world right now, it doesn't paint a pretty picture, does it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, everyone's reading about what's happening in the kind of global economy and what's happening in the UK. This is just a really good survey. If you've not read it, it's a PwC survey, came out about a month ago. I found it quite interesting. You know, you can all translate that into your own context in your company in the UK. But basically, if you've got a problem attracting and retaining staff right now, it's probably not going to get any easier. There are clearly expectations for pay that are rising. You might be able to throw money at the problem if that's your company's problem, but not everyone's going to be able to do that. So which side of the line are you going to be? And it might not work anyway. I mean, let's be clear, talent myth number one for me is that you only have to pay people more to keep them. Well, possibly, but Harvard Business Review research has long established that using money alone doesn't help people stick. You might defer them leaving for a time, but once they're unsettled, people go. To use the popular phrase of the last week, when the herd moves, it moves. And actually 9 out of 10 people would probably rather have a boss that cares about them, and a 20% raise is one other finding of that similar research. So in the UK, we're seeing clear risks in the public sector. They're somewhat different to the findings here in the global survey. There may well be a summer of discontent, pays lagging, if you look back over the last decade or so in public sector. So basically the context is pay is a problem. Paying people more isn't the answer for all of you. So what else can you do?
Yeah.
And this would be kind of the other areas to start investing in. These are the kind of 5 predictors that make up a resignation equation. So I wonder whether you know what the answers to these 5 predictors would be inside your organization. So people may join you, or they might be leaving you because they don't feel work is fulfilling, they can't be their true selves. It might be money, not feeling cared for or listened to. I think there's a couple of other talent myths that sit beneath this, just again from my impression. Myth 2 is that it's your goal to keep everyone for as long as possible. Well, you know, possibly, but actually it's no longer expected by any of us, is it, that employees will grow up in one company? The US Bureau of Labor Statistics reported last year that the average tenure for somebody in my age bracket, 55 to 64, is about 9.4 years, whilst it's only 2.8 years for those between 24 and 34. So, you know, you're always going to have a level of churn. The question that you're asking yourself is, what's acceptable and what's a risk for my business, and which skills and capabilities, and it might be which demographics, which age groups. So you have to look at a variety of different data sources to define what level of churn is a problem for you. Talent myth number 3, by the way, and by the way, I've used all these myths in trying to persuade people that I knew what I was doing as an HR professional. But talent myth number 3 is that people leave you only because they're unhappy. Well, yeah, I mean, some workers don't find joy in their current work or workplace for sure, but it's not true for everyone. Sometimes there's just an opportunity that's too good to pass up, and so you leave anything anyway, and there's nothing a good employer could do to stop you. What actually keeps people, my surmise, and that was certainly the HS2 experience, is it's about your culture, who you are as a company, and what you can offer people in return, and that's kind of all there is. So I say invest in that. If you've got a culture that is around continuously improving and developing the people who work for you, there's a level of churn that will happen, but actually it's a level of churn that you can resist. And equally, that investment story is a very good story to put out there in terms of attracting people to come and work for you, who are likely to be in more of a what's in it for me culture than they ever have been in the past over the course of the next 10 years because of the demographics and labour shortages, which I don't believe are a temporary phenomenon. So those are the popular problems of the day that we're all facing, I think.
And I think what we've seen really change because of the pandemic really is that emphasis on leadership. So in all the surveys that we've been running over the last few years, then here you can see on the screen in blue, leadership with that circle around it. And before it kind of sat there in that maintain area of this grid. Since the pandemic, that's really shifted. And I think it connects to what you've just been saying, is that there's never been more importance on leadership capability. And if we look at some of those other themes that sit in the orange as well around recognition, well-being, growth, a lot of that stems from the relationship that you have with your manager and how you see the leadership of the organizations that you're working for. People want to feel valued and appreciated. People want to feel as if they're working for a company and for a leader that cares about them. And I think we expect leaders to know us and know how we want to learn and grow, how we want to develop our careers as well. So I think we're really seeing leadership capability shift and that have a huge influence on the employee experience as well. Would you agree, Neil? Is that what you've seen?
I do agree, and I think and again I agree because of the experiences that I've seen in companies over the last year or so. I think it's never been a harder time to be a line manager. I think you're battling with a couple of things that you may not have seen before. You're obviously battling trying to find the right pattern of work for people when there's a wide range of options and choices around what constitutes hybrid working. You may also be battling with the fact that there's some form of digital divide emerging in your workplace between frontline workers and blue collar workers versus office staff, and you might well feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. And you're in a bit of a debate really around how individualized your team and your leadership style will be, when actually part of you might yourself be thinking, this is all new, and I've lost a bit of control that I used to have, and it all feels a bit uncomfortable. So I think actually when we talk about managers needing to lead and leaders needing to set direction, we need to understand that they're all humans too, and that they might well need their own worries, fears, concerns surfaced and handled, because if you don't do that, how are they going to do a great job for the troops that they're responsible for in your organization? So the historic underinvestment in mental health and well-being and in training for people in leadership positions, I think is an addressable gap that we need to focus on.
Yeah, I agree. Before we go into kind of your experiences at HS2, when it comes to uncovering those moments that matter, then I think what we're seeing really matter is that ability to listen across the whole employee life cycle, and that shift to more regular listening. So it's not just about running a one-off engagement survey anymore. It's not agile enough. It's about that ability to look at the employee experience when someone joins, all the way through to when they leave. And by asking the right questions, we're able to get to the stage where we understand the moments that matter across the employee life cycle. And to your point, Neil, earlier, those can be anything. Those can be coming back from maternity leave, paternity leave, adoption leave. It can be career anniversaries. It can be one-to-one conversations that you're having with your leader. And some research that I have read basically says that we should be aiming to have 80% positive experiences, because if we get that bit right, for those 20% that are less positive, then we've already built trust. So it means that everything else that we're doing is heading in the right direction. So we should be really intentionally thinking about those moments that matter and intentionally making them as positive as possible. Why would we not?
I'm going to jump ahead, because let me just bring this to life. Before we start, anybody on this call can contact me to ask me anything about the strategy and plans that I and my team developed at HS2, and I will go into those in whatever detail you want individually. Let me just give you a personal story. So as the HR director, I identified that actually, whilst we were doing quite a good job getting people into the organization, this would have been the experience both before and after the pandemic, we were doing a less good job at keeping them. In other words, we were seeing resignation rates in some functions, not all, peaking at 1, 3, 6, 9 months. It was predictable. And of course, as a resourcing function, you feel like, or you worry that you might be letting the side down by hiring the wrong people. And line managers always say that's what you've done. But equally, as a resourcing function, you're thinking, we're finding really good people for this organization. Why are these line managers making a mess of it all and they're leaving so quickly? Somewhere in the middle sits the truth. But the data from my HRIS, Human Resource Information System, highlighted that there was a problem. So how did we solve that problem to get at the identified moments that matter? The survey tools that I used and ran with WorkBuzz was able to cut me data on how new entrants were feeling by function and by teams, and the commentary provided gave me some insight. And in fact, I identified that there were 2 or 3 departments where it really was an issue that the management team and the line managers hiring needed to address about the fundamentally unwelcoming approach that they'd taken to new people arriving. And equally, it challenged me around some things that we were doing, having pivoted to trying to onboard people online that just weren't good enough. And I took those findings back to my executive team and we agreed that we were going to tackle it. An illustration of leadership from the top in action and culture then would be that for onboarding, I agreed with Mark Thurston, the CEO at HS2, that throughout the pandemic, every month he and I would spend 1 to 2 hours online with anybody who had joined the organization, however senior or not that they were, and we would answer their questions and talk to them about their experience of onboarding for that 1 to 2 hours. In other words, we made it a priority. Can you imagine, once it became known that the HR director and the CEO were meeting all new entrants, can you imagine how that upped the game in departments and with line managers everywhere once we'd shown that there was a real interest in it? So you've got 3 things there. The data said there was a problem. We analysed survey results to find out what that problem was and identified actions on both sides that we could change, and then put a cultural stamp on this isn't good enough, because one of our values was about respect, and it didn't feel like we were being respectful enough to new entrants, hence the cultural leadership that came from Mark and myself. That's making it real for you, but I couldn't have done that without having background data from my HR function and also kind of the insights from WorkBuzz. If you're going to go about building a highly engaged, productive, motivated workforce, I would say to you, you have to start with a strategic intent. So I published a strategy document at HS2 some 6 months after starting. I don't need to go into all of the background on this, but this was an organization in 2017 that was not held in high regard, was seen as potentially failing. There was a lot of speculation that the government wouldn't invest in what is Britain's largest infrastructure programme. Phase 1 London to Birmingham is about £40 billion on its own. And I was brought in to, in effect, support Mark Thurston, the CEO, in a complete capacity, capability and culture rebuild. And this was the document that enshrined the things that mattered. And the 4 themes may sound blindingly obvious, but they were the root cause of everything that happened afterwards. There was something about professionalising the HR service. There was something about building a real skills legacy for the UK as an outcome of the programme. And then there was something about an effective organisation with the right capability and capacity. And crucially, a diverse workforce with a high-performing and inclusive culture. So it was a matter of strategic intent that we were going to create that. And we were going to create that as the basis of exciting people to come and work for us and stay with us and make a really big contribution to the programme. And we were going to do that not just at HS2 Limited, the parent organisation, but to set the tone through values across the whole of our supply chain. So that's in effect what that document said we were going to do after 6 months of my arrival. That was published in about March, April 2018.
And just tell our listeners a bit of the context to what you joined when you joined HS2 as well.
The organisation was hemorrhaging people. Churn was probably heading towards 10, 11, 12%. I was the 4th HR director in a year. There had been a predecessor who left the organisation under a cloud, and then 2 interims who'd failed for different reasons. I had an HR function that had been found publicly culpable for overpaying redundancy payments, therefore wasting public money to the tune of £1.7 million, with everyone thinking that they were the worst HR organisation in the world. but somehow we were symbolic and representative to the outside world of HS2 overall. I was Mark Thurston's first external hire onto his C-suite team, because he recognized that unless he could fix, unless he would get nowhere unless he fixed the organizational challenges, starting with having a function that was advising him and supporting him properly in that transformation and rebuild of capability and culture and capacity. It is without doubt the most difficult job I've ever stepped into. I think if I'd really understood what I was stepping into, I might have hesitated. And then again, part of me says now, no, I wouldn't have done, and it was all lovely, it was fun. It was, you know, you'll never believe that I was still using a comb 4 years ago. Actually, that's not true.
I'm glad you said that bit.
So, I mean, let's just take one illustration of the kind of diverse, inclusive culture. In the past, of course, HS2 had run an employee survey. It did it, you know, kind of every couple of years, and nothing then happened to the feedback that was received. It was an HR thing, not a business thing. We weren't untypical of a lot of large organizations that kind of paid lip service to engagement, if we're honest. So the strategy required us to be different. It required us to define what experience looked like to a much a greater degree and aspirationally. I'd spent some years rebuilding what values meant inside the organization and making sure that they were embedded part of how we assessed people, both to join and to move up and through the organization. I was well aware that we had to get the 4 engagement enablers in place. So this, in effect, was all of the stuff that I was doing between 2017 through to the start of the pandemic. I was, in effect, getting the organization ready where it could start taking employee voice seriously, because I had an intuitive sense of what was missing. And then I used employee voice to confirm that we were on the right track and that we were delivering the right things and to up the pace. What I didn't do was start surveying people before I'd done any work and before I could give them concrete promises and commitments around the difference that they were going to see, because I felt that had been what had happened in the past.
Yeah. And one of the things we were talking about the other day that kind of really landed and resonated with me was around the way that you made your values a living and breathing thing across HS2 as well. And I think when we're talking about moments that matter, just tell us what you did at the beginning of every meeting.
Yeah, step back one step. Firstly, the values were defined by the employees themselves through a series of focus groups. And then their meaning and words captured in a values handbook then became part of both the whole onboarding, induction and hiring process. So it was clear from the outside, if you were joining, this was taken seriously. Reinforcing that internally, simple things. And this is probably the most powerful. Every meeting at HS2, including from the board meeting downwards, the first agenda item was a values moment where an employee in the meeting would share with the rest of the group a values moment relating to one of those 4 things: respect, integrity, leadership and safety, about what was happening to them at work, or what was happening to them in their personal lives, or what was happening to somebody that they knew, or something that they'd read. So that was the biggest reinforcement, which was, this is an organization that has done more than put these things on the wall. We actively talk about them all the time.
Yeah, then that to me is a massive example of how you can live and breathe those moments that matter and bring to the forefront kind of what the organization really stands for. So I love that. The moments that people shared made me laugh and brought me to tears. Oh. They were that personal. That's how good this was. Amazing.
So, let's talk about the point at which we really started getting active in surveying people. And we were all ready to go with a brand new approach designed at pace with WorkBuzz. And we were going to start in April 2020. And you'll remember that the entire country went into lockdown about middle of March onwards as COVID struck us. So here's the big arrow around, or circle around, external events. Everything that we were going to do and have been planned to do in terms of how we were going to run an engagement action with our staff had to pivot and change. And WorkBuzz and I had spent some weeks preparing this, and I had obviously got my executive colleagues on board with everything we were going to do, and And the pivot was, we're now in a COVID world. We're sending people home. They're not going to be on office or site. We're going to have to sort of get them through this. And I signed off a different approach internally to how we were going to use surveys, and a different tool and a different frequency, and had it up and running in a matter of days, when normally it would have taken weeks. And that is both a symbol of HS2's culture and of WorkBuzz's ability to work with a company, a client at pace, because basically everything changed.
Yeah. And I think the pandemic brought new moments that matter to the forefront, didn't it? So, you know, I think what we found at WorkBuzz is that we were thrown into the realms of doing quick surveys to find out if people had the tools and equipment to do their job, and then moving on to well-being. How are people doing? How are people feeling? And then really helping shape hybrid working. What does that look like? What will it look like when we go back to the office? So that ability to be agile and to keep asking, listening, responding has never been more important. The world has changed.
Absolutely. So forgive me, it's a busy slide, but you know, by the time we got to October and we've been running well-being pulses, you can see the trends there in terms of the response rates and the kind of engagement scores. We started off back in 2018 at a kind of 57% engagement level, so really quite low. You know, every couple of months we ran this and we identified different things. So for example, in October 2020, pulling out what we saw in October, we still had issues with mental health and well-being, career development, and coping with workload, extended hours. I think all of us felt a little bit of that digital overload and a degree of frazzle that came from being in Zoom or Teams meetings 12 hours a day. I can remember sitting in my cell, this cell at home, longing for the commute that I used to have, because at least then I might interact with some other human being or even read the paper, heaven forbid. So this was something that we were all experiencing. I would have been able to take those headline surveys and drill down, and we changed our approach to wellbeing and really upped the occupational health support on the back of those findings, for example. Yeah. The other thing I'd make the point is that this meant everyone got into a rhythm of, you've said we're listening, we're doing. And I think as a normal way of doing business, which I think was helpful. In that sense, the pandemic accelerated taking employee voice seriously in a way that it might not have happened like that without the pandemic. Obviously, I'm speculating, but I think this helped actually.
Yeah, and I think that ability to take it away from lengthy surveys to short, sharp pulses, quick insights to enable you to move quickly.
I would say that employee voice wasn't the only way we listened to people. But so, for example, you take findings from a survey. I'd also set up an employee workplace forum on a voluntary basis with elected representatives. So we were able to take the findings from the survey. We were able to sort of make some policy recommendations and choices, discuss them with a workplace forum, and use the thematic analysis that we were getting to shape how we were going to work, both during the pandemic and when the pandemic was over. And I found it quite interesting that we were able to get really inside it, use data to explore how people were thinking and feeling, and to get the workplace forum on board with the data and allow them to understand it and help us shape policy. So I'm moving at pace doing it. So all this slide does is illustrate that we were able to get some real insights as a result of working in the way that we were working at pace.
And I think if we're thinking about hybrid working, then that's a moving beast as well, isn't it? Because even now I'm speaking to lots of organisations that are still playing around with what a good hybrid working model is. So that ability to keep checking in to see what's working, to see what's not, is really important as well.
In HS2, by the way, our ultimate response was to say there is an expectation, minimally, that we want to see some of you in the office. And the conversation with line managers and senior managers, who tended to be older and more comfortable in their detached houses in the suburbs, of which I'm a prime example, and perhaps were less inclined to be in the office, that the key finding we had was that younger folk and more recent folk to the organisation, and particularly our direct entry talent programmes, the graduates and apprentices, they needed us to be visible and with them in the office. They didn't have the luxury of the space at home that we had. They were often living with other people. They were working off the kitchen table. They were craving normal social things from work and talking to other people. So it was quite powerful holding a mirror up to the more fortunate amongst us, saying, look at our values. We're here for everyone in this organization, not just ourselves. So we established minimum standards and then left line managers and employees talking about individual working arrangements beyond or around that minimum, but let everyone fix it through a dialogue rather than imposing rules on them, and it worked really well. The other thing that I'd just like to illustrate is if you're working with WorkBuzz, then there's no excuses around overlooking some of the other challenges. I talked about an inclusive culture. I'm quite proud that over 4 years, as HS2's workforce doubled, we went from having 16% BAME representation to 23%, when the sector norm for construction is about 11%. And we had 37% female representation in our workforce, up from 30%, when the representation in the sector is just about 20 to 21. So we were breaking new ground here in becoming a more inclusive, more diverse employer versus the norms in the sector. And of course, we were able to do that because we were on a journey that was strategy set over 4 years, but we're able to look at how those segments of our workforce actually felt about how we were doing. And the insights we got, cutting the data any which way we could, were really, really helpful to that. HS2 became the first company in the UK to get the Clear Assure Platinum accreditation from the Clear Companies approach. And that was because we built EDI thinking and frameworks into every aspect of that employee life cycle that we show, built in, not bolted on. And this was how I knew that we were doing a good job or not, basically.
And it's that, yeah.
And I was able to use the data to go and have conversations with people. Sorry.
I think we're saying the same things. I think I was just going to say it's that intersectionality of the data that's really important as well, isn't it? That ability to slice and dice the data, to look at different groups based on where they sit within an organization and how their experience differs and what their moments that matter are as well.
Yes. You know, lots of people make claims about the impact of experience and engagement on performance and productivity. If you look at WorkBuzz's website, they show you how you can put a cost number, so a financial number on the impact of engagement. I had my numbers done by our finance function. Basically, by slowing absenteeism and slowing churn, I was able to demonstrate that we were making a cost saving that more than demonstrated an ROI from the cost of working with WorkBuzz as a supplier. You know, that baseline survey between 18 and 20, look at how many more people were saying, this is a great place to work and I'm recommending it to people. That's pretty key out in the marketplace, because your employees that you have are your own best advocates. And people tend not to leave organizations that they rate, or rather they leave them less frequently. As I said, going back to talent myth number 2, they may still leave irrespective of you being the best employer in the entire universe. But nonetheless, the data suggests it's less frequently. So this made sense, not just because it was the realization of our strategy, but because it played out in other ways that were positive for the business.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it's like if you can put a number to measuring the employee experience into those moments that matter, then that's so powerful, isn't it? That will get the ear of any board, any CEO in terms of the business impact of all the great work that is out there. I'm just conscious we've got 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask of Neil while you have him here? If you do, just pop them in the chat and I'll pick them up and ask Neil. But otherwise, do you want to just close off with this, Neil, while see if any questions come through?
We've got loads of strike action going on in the public sector. It's particularly predominant in rail, and yet here we have a construction rail business where the employees and their union representatives have voted to accept a 2% pay offer on the back of a 2-year pay freeze. And I'm not entirely certain that's coincidental. What this demonstrates is that the employees understand how HS2 works and trades. They understand when they're being told the truth by line managers, and and so do their trade union representatives. And I don't think that's common in rail or construction. And I think this is just an outcome of running the company in a different way. I'm not going to say it's directly caused by everything that we did, but I think it's not a coincidence either. It's somewhere in the middle. Our employees believe what we tell them at HS2, and that's probably my proudest legacy.
Amazing. Trust, a perfect example of trust. Okay.
And if you don't believe me about the importance of this subject, this is just a statement that's the equivalent of the US IOD, basically saying, you know, this is how you really take a temperature check on your culture. And it's the key sentence here is, understand leaders are truly committed to listening to feedback, continuously improving the experience. That is actually the key sentence, and that can't be done unless you've built trust and inculcated core values first. And if you've done that, it's pretty hard as a CEO to mess the business up. All you've got to do is set the strategic direction. And perhaps that's my more facetious, flippant statement of the same, which is, how can people follow you if they don't know where you're taking them? Any road will do. So the very essence of leadership, if you can't translate it from that US statement, is you have to have a vision. You can't blow an uncertain trumpet. So in your organization, what are you getting people to follow? What are they getting behind? Because it should be clarity around what your organization is there to do, what success looks like for it, and what your expectation is around how they act and behave and how they'll be treated.
Absolutely, which brings us nicely to the key takeaways, really. So we were here today to just think about how the moments that matter can help attract and retain talent. Hopefully through Neil's experiences at HS2, we've kind of brought to life the way that employee listening can do that. So these are just a few things that we thought would be a nice wrap up to it. But really, it's about being intentional and working really hard to understand what those moments that matter are for those different groups across your organization. Gain a deep understanding of the motivations of why people work for you and with you. And I think there's so many conversations that we're having at the moment around employee value proposition and what that is. And, you know, when I speak to our consultants here, what does that mean? It's about looking into the soul of the individual, understanding their key motivations for coming to work and, you know, that connection to purpose. So if you can gain a deeper understanding of what that is by asking some really rich questions in your surveys, then that can really help inform your employee value proposition. I think there's absolutely an increased focus on the employee now as opposed to the employer. Employee voice has never been more important. And I think people are more willing to shout about what they want from their jobs, from their work environments as well. And I think engagement has become limiting for some, and that's partly why we started talking at the beginning around engagement being a choice. So think about the employee experience, think about all the things that affect that employee experience throughout the day, really. Can you map that back and think about the employee experience for everyone inside your organization, and just listen at all levels. And I think what Neil's demonstrated is that you can use the richness of the data that you collate through your surveys to really join the dots and to really support the people strategies that you have in place. Anything for you to add, Neil, before we wrap up?
No, thank you, Dawn. That's a really good summary. As I said, there's an offer there to anybody on the call today. If there's anything that in the slides that you want to challenge or question, or I can help you in any way personally, then just reach out, get in touch, and I'll do my best. And I'd encourage you all to come along to WorkBuzz Live, where you'll meet lots of people with equally very good stories about what their organizations are doing that will make this one look old-fashioned, I hope.
So WorkBuzz Live, 5th of October, Plaisterers Hall, London, a date with WorkBuzz. So have a lovely evening, stay cool, enjoy the sunshine, and thank you very much for joining. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.